All right, let's get into the Dimir fun ranking video. First up is Alea, Cunning Conqueror. This is a 4 mana, 2/4 fairy warlock with flying. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, you create a 1/1 fairy rogue creature token with flying. And whenever one or more fairies you control deal combat damage to a player, goad target creature that player controls. So my first impressions of this commander is I think the precon from Wilds of Eldraine, so it's a blue-black fairies deck. I think this was the face commander. I don't know how good of a face commander this was, but as like a standalone fairy or like just blue-black commander, it seems like a fun commander. You have to cast spells on opponent's turns to get the fairies, which is fine. And it's the first spell, right? So you can only get 3 a turn cycle, because you have to be on each opponent's turn. So I think there are better value commanders, but in terms of fun, I think instant speed stuff is fun. So into the fun tier it goes. I said fun a lot, didn't I? Anyways, next up is Anawan the Rune Thief. This is a 4 mana 2/4 vampire rogue. Other rogues you control get +1/+1. And whenever one or more rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them. If that player mills at least 1 creature card this way, you draw a card. So if you can give your rogues double strike, you mill a whole bunch of cards. I've never been a huge fan of mill in Commander personally. I do like that this is a rogue deck, but I don't know how fun I think this is. I'm gonna put it in kind of fun. I think there are more interesting rogue commanders now, and I don't think milling is that fun of a playstyle for me personally. If you disagree, I would love to know. Next up is Arami of the Dead Tide. This is a 3 mana 1/4 Merfolk Wizard with tap, exile cards from your graveyard equal to the number of opponents you have. Target creature in your graveyard gains Encore until end of turn. The Encore cost is equal to its mana cost. So for Encore, if you don't know, is you exile the creature and pay its mana cost. And then for each opponent, you create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste. Then you sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. You can only activate it as a sorcery. So the idea with this commander is you mill over, I don't know, Grave Titan or a Noxious Gearhulk or Worm Coil Engine, basically like any massive creatures, get 3 token copies of them, swing in, and then you sacrifice them. Now, of course, the creature in the graveyard is then exiled, so you need a way of bringing them back, which I don't know if there are a ton of ways in Dimir. Personally, I think this is a very fun commander. It's almost in wanna build for me, but I think it's going to stay in very fun. Next up is a Taurus, our Oracle of Half-Truths, a 4 mana 3/2 human advisor with menace. When it enters, target opponent looks at the top 3 cards of your library, separates them into a face-down pile and a face-up pile, put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So it's like a mini factor fiction on a commander. I think this is a kind of fun commander. I don't know what you can really do with this. Maybe you blink, or maybe if you're a graveyard deck, I don't know, maybe a reanimator deck. Yeah, I can't think of what I'd really want to do with this commander, so I'm gonna put it in kind of fun, with the understanding that maybe there's some actually insanely cracked things you can do with it. Next up is Captain, I'm not saying that. It's a Captain Nagat Horthord. Close enough. This is a 5 mana 3/6 horror pirate. Horrors you control have menace. Whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. And at the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn, put it onto the battlefield under your control. So it's a horror kindred deck that you mill people and then get stuff into play. See, I know I put another builder in kind of fun, but the fact that it's a horror deck and then you also get to just steal their stuff means that it's actually pretty effective against graveyard decks. So I'm going to put it in behind. Actually, I think it goes above. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the top end of fun for now. Next up is Surku Dimir Lobotomist. This is a 4 mana 2/3. A lot of 4 mana 2/3s I'm noticing. Human Wizard. Whenever you play a blue spell, remove the top card of target library from the game. Weird wording. Whenever you play a black spell, remove the top card of target library from the game. So whenever you play a blue or black spell, you remove the top card of target library from the game. I guess it's worded that way. In case you cast a Dimir spell, you actually get both, because it's a blue and a black spell. Your opponent can't play non-land cards with the same name as cards removed from the game. Sorry for the cat there. So this is a not fun commander. It's really not effective in Commander, in my opinion. I mean, it is. You can like exile people, so it's mill in the sense that you take cards out of their graveyard or take cards from their library, but instead of in the graveyard, they're in exile, which is just a lot better. But I don't know if I would want to build an entire commander deck around this. Next up is Cyclonist the Saboteur, a 4 mana 2/5. A lot of 4 mana. It's a robot. It has more than meets the eye. So for 5 blue and a black, you may cast this card converted, which means on the backside, which we'll get to in a second. It has flying. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it connives. Then if its power is 5 or greater, convert it. So to have a creature connive, you draw a card, then discard a card. And if you discard a non-land card, you put a counter on this creature. And the backside is Cyclonus Cybertron Fighter. It's a vehicle. It's a 5/5, has living metal. So as long as it's your turn, it's also a creature. Has, as I said, flying. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, convert it. If you do, there's an additional beginning phase after this phase. So the beginning phase includes untap, upkeep, and draw steps. So if you flip this into a vehicle, you attack, you then flip it back, and then you get another untap, upkeep, draw, which is really powerful. Do I want to build this? I've never actually looked at this card before, but that seems like a really solid effect. I'm going to put that in wanna build. Maybe I'll do a video on this. They seem really solid. It's 7 mana to flip it, but you just have to give it some counters in Dimir. So maybe like a Dimir's counter deck. Even Voltron would be good, just giving it like a Loxodon Warhammer or something, just like a massive, because it doesn't have to, it has to deal combat damage. Okay, so it does have to deal combat damage in order to flip it. Interesting. I'm gonna move it to very fun. No, I'm gonna put it wanna build. Next up is DK, Finder of the Lost, a 3 mana 1/4 zombie employee. When it enters, you open an attraction. Whenever you roll a 2, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Whenever you roll a 4, you may tap or untap target artifact or creature. And whenever you roll a 6, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm going to put this at very fun. I like attractions. I like dice rolling. I know a lot of people aren't like a huge fan of that. However, I actually built a deck for this. I think it was my 3rd deck tech on the channel. So if you want to go watch that, you should definitely go check it out. It's much lower quality than anything I make today. And maybe I'll do a reboot of this commander. But yeah, it seems really fun. Next up is Dragonlord Silumgard. This is a 6 mana 3/5 Elder Dragon with flying and death touch. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature or planeswalker for as long as you control Dragonlord Silumgard. This is a not fun commander for me, personally. You could build it as like a Helm of the Host deck where you just keep making copies of it and stealing creatures and planeswalkers, but I don't know. I think it's fine in the 99, just I'm not interested in building this as my commander. Next up is Dralnu Lichlord. It's a 5 mana 3/3 zombie wizard. If damage would be dealt to Dralnu, sacrifice that many permanents instead. Then you can tap, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard, gains flashback until end of turn. So that seems awful. I mean, the tapping flashback seems good, right? But you have to deal with the fact that you get kind of hosed. All right, I'm gonna put this in kind of fun. I feel like there's some way to prevent that damage in Dimir that I'm not thinking of that makes it like powerful and like interesting. I mean, I like the downside, right? Where you can't block with it. If someone bolts it, you have to sack 3 lands or like 3 artifacts or something. So that's fun. Next up is Eloise Nephelia Sleuth. It's a 5 mana 4/4 human rogue. Whenever another creature you control dies, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a token, you surveil one. Seems like a solid commander. I'm gonna put it right here in the middle of fun. I like investigating. I like aristocrats. I like that it's in different colors for aristocrats. So yeah, there it goes. Next up is Urtai Resurrected. This is a 4 mana 3/2 Phyrexian human wizard with flash. When it enters, choose up to 1. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature or planeswalker, its controller draws a card. Not really interested in this as a commander. I'm gonna put this in kind of fun. Maybe if you want to build some sort of like blue-black token deck where you can like blink this and then like destroy your own tokens to then draw a card. But I feel like there's a lot of hoops to jump through for not a lot of value. Next up is Atrada Deadly Fugitive. It's a 3 mana 1/4 vampire assassin with death touch. Face down creatures you control, have 2 blue and a black, turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile it. Then you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. And whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. So this is interesting. So it's like an assassin deck, and with the Assassin's Creed set that just came out, we've got a lot more of those. And then you gotta just steal people's cards and make them into creatures, and then 4 mana you gotta cast them for free. So if it's like an Omniscience, let's say, you get to just cast it. But if it's a creature, you can just turn it up for its cloak cost. So basically any creature that's 4 or greater, you get a cheat. Anything that's less, it costs the same to flip it for creatures. And then also any spells you get that are 4 or greater are essentially, well, 4 is the same, but anything like 5 or greater, you're cheating on that mana cost, which seems really good. Yeah, that seems like, I'm gonna put this in very fun, I think. I like assassin decks. Next up is Atrada the Silencer. It's a 4 mana 3/5 vampire assassin. It can't be blocked. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile target creature that player controls, and put a hit counter on that card. That player loses the game if they own 3 or more cards exiled with hit counters. Atrada owner shuffles that. Basically, you shuffle this into your library after it hits. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. I think this is it's weird, right? Because you have to tuck your own commander away, which is a cool like deck building restriction. The most obvious thing to do again is just non-legendary clones of it. And because it's shuffling into your library, I don't know if you can commander rule it. I feel like you can. I mean, you can also, if you have ways of bouncing this back to your hand or something after it deals combat damage before this trigger completely resolves, that also works. So I think that I'm gonna put that in fun. I think there are enough ways to kind of finagle it where you get this working. Next up is Gissa and Geralf. It's a 4-mana 4/4 human wizard. Whenever they enter the battlefield, mill 4 cards. And then during each of your turns, you may cast zombie creature spells from your graveyard. So it's a single creature spell, right? You can't cast more than one. This is fine. I'm gonna put this in kind of fun. I think there's just more interesting zombie commanders than this. It's a solid starter if you like really want to build your first zombie deck. I think this is not going to get you hated off the table. It provides good value, but it's just not one that I'm going out and like really excited to build around. Next up is Grim Grin Corpseborn. Man, that was a mouthful. It enters the battlefield tapped and does an untap during your untap step. Sacrifice another creature, untap Grin, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when it attacks, destroy target creature defending player controls, then put a counter on it. So another zombie commander. It's a sack outlet, which is cool, and it untaps itself, so like Dimir Orb can do some cute things with this. But I don't know if I would think this is a fun commander. I'm gonna put it right behind Gissa and Geralf here. I think it could be a fun commander, but I don't know how I would want to build it to make it that way. Let me know in the comments if you have this or seen this deck and there's something that I'm like missing and you think I should move it up a tier. Next up is Grima, Saruman's Footman, 4-mana 1/4 human advisor, can't be blocked, and whenever they deal combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then that player puts the exiled card that weren't cast this way on the bottom of their library in a random order. So you get a free instant or sorcery spell, and they can't block. Give it double strike and you get 2. I'm always so hesitant on cards like this because commander damage is like a consideration. So do you build it like Voltron, but maybe you don't want to do that, and giving it double strike, like, I don't know. It's always such like a weird mix for me. However, I think it could be a fun commander. I'm going to put it at the back end of fun here. Also, I don't know how many ways there are in Dimir to actually give things double strike. I know there's equipment like Brass Knuckles can do it, but I don't know. There must be some way to do it other than like equipment, right? Next up is Garuda, Doom of Depths, 6-mana 6/6 Demon Kraken. It has Companion, so your starting deck contains cards with even mana costs. So if your deck only has even mana cost, you can play this outside of the game as like your 101st card. You can pay 3 mana to put it into your hand, and then you just get to cast it for 6 later on. When it enters, each player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. Put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So some cute rules notes with Garuda. First off, this is a wanna build. I've loved this commander for so long, and I will build a deck around it. I had a Baldrotha companion deck that was actually really sick, but something that's super interesting with Garuda is even if the cards are exiled to something like Leyline of the Void, it doesn't actually care, and you can still get that creature back. Because Garuda doesn't check the graveyard, it simply checks a card that was from among the cards that were put into the graveyard or exiled. It's a very weird ruling, so if you see Leyline of the Void or Rest in Peace out, don't worry, this effect still works. Next up, it is Hidetsugu and Kairi. This is a 5-mana 5/4 Ogre Demon Dragon with flying. When it enters, you brainstorm, and then when it dies, you exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. If it's an instant or sorcery, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So my friend actually has this deck, and they built it, I think it was like a clone sacrifice deck, where because of the legend rule, you have to sacrifice one of them. So it actually, which is a benefit of the deck, it's really fun to play. It is blazing fast, and I'm gonna put this in very fun. You get to cheat big spells. It's a interesting play pattern. Yeah, I love this deck. Next up is Inquisitor Eisenhorn, 4-mana 2/3 Human Inquisitor. You may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card this way, you make a legendary 4/4 black demon creature token with flying, and whenever this creature deals combat damage, whenever Inquisitor deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. So remember how I said it's weird seeing Dimir commanders care about like cracking in for damage? This is another case where I think people would be scared because of the commander damage, so I think it's probably better in the 99, and I'm upset you get a legendary demon. I'm sure there's some 40k lore reason for that, but I wish you get like just a generic 4/4 demon just for a little bit more value. So yeah, I'm gonna put this in the tail end of fun, I think. I like the combat damage aspect. Sorry about that. I like the combat damage aspect of this commander, but I'm not really into it. Next up is John Arenesis, Shattered One, a 4-mana 3/3 elf wizard. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent gains control of up to 1 target creature you control. Put 2+1/+1 counters on it and tap it. It's goaded for the rest of the game, and it gains, this creature can't be sacrificed. And whenever a creature you own but don't control attacks, you draw a card. So I actually have 2 deck techs on the channel for this guy. One was like my first video to ever get over 1,000 views, and the other one was a few months ago, I think. It is a really powerful commander. I love this play pattern. I'm gonna put this in Wanna build. Some things that I missed in the video that I'll cover here real quick is Persist is really good here because you can give a Persist creature away and then give it +1/+1 counters. And the other thing that's really good is there's the new case from Mirza Karlov Manor that's a demonic tutor. So you get a skeleton, then you can just give the skeleton away and then you can solve the case and like just tutor a card up. I missed that original interaction. So there's some cool things here. Next up is Kel's Fight Fixer, 4-mana 4/3. Azura Warlock with Menace. Whenever you sack a creature, you may pay Dimir Hybrid, so blue or black. If you do, draw a card. 1, sack a creature. This Kel's gains indestructible till end of turn. Seems like a fine commander. It's blue-black sacrifice. I don't know. I think they're just more interesting commanders, especially at 4 mana, right? Because it's 4 mana, you have to pay 1 to sack a creature, and then you have to pay another blue or black to even get a card draw out of it. I'm not that interested. Next up is Katose, the Silent Spider. It's a 5-mana 4/4 human ninja. When they enter the battlefield, exile target card other than a basic land from an opponent's graveyard. Search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles. For as long as you control this creature, you may play one of the cards exiled, and you may spend mana as though it's mana of any type any color to cast it. That's a whole lot of words for a very fine effect. Kind of fun it goes. You get to steal 1 thing from someone's graveyard, and you force them to shuffle, which can be a downside sometimes. I know there are cards that care when your opponent shuffle their deck, so this would be funny if you're doing like a Grixis Riversong deck, where you have both of them in here, and then you play this card, and then you force them to shuffle, then Riversong deals damage to them. So yeah, but otherwise, I'm not really that into it. Next up is Cridle of Baldur's Gate, 2-mana 1/3 human elf rogue. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses 1 life, mills a card, you gain 1 life, and you scry 1. Whenever you attack, you may pay 2. If you do, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is an unblockable commander that doesn't give you a whole bunch of benefit. It's probably great in limited, in like, well, this is AFN, not even Baldur's Gate, right? So actually it's still probably good in limited. But in terms of like commander as its own commander, I'm gonna put this in, I'll put this in the tail end of fun, I think. No, I don't actually, I'm gonna put it like in the middle of kind of fun, and not fun, but kind of fun. Next up is Lazov, Dimir Mastermind, 4-mana 3/3 shapeshifter with hexproof. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may have Lazov become a copy of that card, except its name is Lazov, Dimir Mastermind. It's legendary in addition to other types, and it has hexproof and this ability. So this is a mill commander that whenever you mill the best creature an opponent controls, you basically just turn Lazov into it. So it could become a Wormcoil engine, or I'm sure there are better creatures. I don't know why I can't think of any. Ulamog. Well, I guess Ulamog doesn't stay in the graveyard. Some Ulamogs do. Basically, this becomes a big creature, and you can keep doing that, and it's 4 mana. And that seems like a very fun deck to me. So I'm going to put that, I think, like here. I'm going to put it at the end of very fun. Next up is Lazov, Familiar Stranger. 3-mana 1/4 shapeshifter. Whenever you commit a crime, you put a +1/+1 counter on Lazov. Then you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you may have Lazov become a copy of that card until the end of turn. This ability only triggers once each turn. So committing a crime is anytime you interact with an opponent, essentially. So if you target them, target anything they control, counter any of their things, and you're targeting a spell, so yeah. And it has to be target opponent, not each opponent. As a commander, though, I don't know where I'd want to really put this. I think I'm going to put this in kind of fun, maybe the top end, maybe the tail end of fun. I'm going to put this at the tail end of fun. I like the idea of committing crimes in Commander, and by that I mean targeting people. And it grows bigger, and then you can have it become a copy of that creature. So if it becomes a copy of like a Muldrifter, you don't get to draw cards, but then you have like a big flyer. So the Voltron strategy is actually kind of viable here. And then next up is Lazov the Multifarious. This is a 2-mana 1/3 shapeshifter. When it enters, you surveil 1, not scries. Then you may pay X and it becomes a copy of target creature card in a graveyard with mana value X, except its name is Lazov the Malfurious. It's legendary in addition to its other types and has this ability. So it's a worse original Lazov. So I'm going to put that in kind of fun. Next up is Lazov, Wearer of Faces. There's so many Lazovs. 2-mana 2/3 shapeshifter detective. When it attacks, exile target card from our graveyard, then investigate. I don't know why I stuttered on that. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, you may have Lazav become a copy of a creature card exiled with it until end of turn. Again, just another like mill commander. It has to attack to do it, so I'm less interested in this. It's a detective. I wish it was a rogue, because at least you can play it in rogue decks. I'm gonna put it, I think, above. I'm gonna put it below the other Lazav, the other 2-mana Lazav. Next up is Lord of the Nazgul. This is a 5-mana 4/3 Wraith Noble with flying. Wraiths you control have protection from Ring Bearers. Very flavorful. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 3/3 black Wraith creature token with Menace. Then if you control 9 or more Wraiths you control have base power and toughness 9/9 until end of turn. So you can play all of the original Nazgul. I actually have no idea how many Wraiths there are in Magic, but I mean, at least you get some when you cast an instant or sorcery spell. And this isn't a once per turn clause, which makes this even better. So even if you don't have the Nazgul, you'd still get Wraiths. Realistically, you could actually build a creatureless version of this deck. Oh, that sounds fun, actually. A creatureless Lord of the Nazgul deck that's just instant sorceries are like, hold on, we're cooking. We're cooking here. I'm gonna put that in Wanna build. I never thought of that before. I don't know why I didn't. I feel like that's a great idea. Anyways, next up is Marvo Deep Operative. This is a 5-mana 1/8 Octopus Rogue. When it attacks, clash with defending player. So each clashing player reveals the top card of their library, then puts that card on top or bottom. A player wins if their card has the higher mana value. Whenever you win a clash, you draw a card, then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value 8 or less without paying its mana cost. So I like that it's an attack trigger and not a combat damage trigger. So it's harder to abuse with like Double Strike, and then you can run cards like Maze of It to take it out of combat. So you get the attack trigger, take it out of combat so it doesn't die, and then you get to cast anything that's like 8 or less for free. So if you just fill your deck with a whole bunch of expensive cards, assuming this can stick and hit, I'm in. This seems very fun. I don't remember seeing this. It was in the precon. Okay. I really didn't look at the MKM precons all that much. Next up is Mirko Vosk, Mind Drinker. 5-mana 2/4 vampire with flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player reveal cards from the top of his or her library until they reveal 4 land cards, then put those cards into their graveyard. So you mill them a whole bunch. See, people are going to be punished for not running enough lands. I'm going to put this in... Where do I want to put this? I'm going to put this in kind of fun, I think. Like here. Next up is Mirko Obsessive Theorist. 3-mana 1/3 Vampire Detective with Flying and Vigilance. Whenever you surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on this card. At the beginning of your end step, you may return target creature card with power less than Mirko's from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So this is like a mill deck, and you get to just keep that card, and you don't even have to attack with this. It's just a good blocker. It's a 1/3 Flying Vigilant. I mean, you can attack, probably should, but Vigilance is great, and whenever you surveil, you put a counter on it. So if you surveil 2 or 3, I think you still only get 1 counter because you're surveilling 1 time. You're surveilling like 3 cards, but you're only taking the action of surveilling once. However, I think that's pretty fun. I'm gonna put this in very fun. I didn't really look at this precon, but I remember I think there were some good cards in it. Didn't they have like Reanimate or Necromancy in it? Anyways, let's go to the next one. Okay, I'm missing a card on the bottom here. Hold on, let's take a look. All right, next up is Ludovic Necrogenius. This is a 2-mana 2/3 human wizard. Whenever they enter or attack, you mill a card, and you may pay X blue black black, exile X creature cards from your graveyard, transform Ludovic. X cannot be 0, activate only as a sorcery, and its backside is Olag, Ludovic's Hubris. It's a zombie, and as this creature transforms into Olag, it becomes a copy of a creature card exiled with it, except its name is Olag. It's a 4/4, it's a legendary blue and black zombie in addition to its other types and colors. In addition to its other colors and types, okay, so I said that backwards. And then you put a +1/+1 counter on it for equal to the number of creature cards exiled with it. So, okay, so it's a self-mill commander that you transform into a 4/4, and then it's almost like a Mimeoplasm in a way, right? That you're exiling, but you exile a bunch of cards, and then you can put a bunch of counters on it. It's a number of creatures though, so you have to exile a lot of creatures to really get like this pumped up. I'm gonna put this in, I think in fun. All right, next up is Narfi, Betrayer King, Nafri. 5-mana 4/3 zombie wizard. Other snow and zombie creatures you control get +1/+1, and you may pay 3 snow mana, so that's specifically mana that comes from a snow source, and then you return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. If you want to build a snow deck, I guess, or a zombie deck, I'm gonna put that like over here, I think. It's a kind of fun commander. Next up is Nebuchadnezzar. This is a 5-mana 3/3 that has, you may pay X, tap, choose a card name, Target opponent reveals X cards at random from their hand, then that player discards all cards with the name revealed this way. Activate only during your turn. Honestly, I think this is a not fun commander. I love the art. I mean, it's Richard Kane Ferguson, so obviously it's just like solid art, but I don't think it's a fun commander. Next up is Nimrus, Una's Trickster, 5 mana 1/6 Fairy Knight with Flash and Flying. Whenever you cast your first spell during each of your opponent's turns, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand and the other into your graveyard. It was like one of the first Flash commanders, because it's any spell, not just instance, so usually people did like Flash shenanigans with it. I'm going to put this in fun, I think. I'll put it right there in the middle of fun. Next up is Obira, Dreaming Duelist, 2 mana 2/2 Fairy Warrior, Flash Flying. Whenever another fairy enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is another like pretty powerful fairy commander. I like that it's 2 mana, has an effect that can help you win games and is impactful but isn't overwhelming. And because if it gets removed a lot, it's so cheap you can recast this like pretty consistently. And I like that it has Flash. I'm gonna put this in fun. I think it's, yeah, I'll put it like right in the middle here of the other 2 fairies. Next up is Una, Queen of the Fae. It's a 6 mana 5/5 fairy wizard with flying. You may pay X and Dimir hybrid, so blue or black. Choose a color. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. For each card of the chosen color exiled this way, create a 1/1 blue and black fairy rogue creature token with flying. Another solid fairy commander. I like that it's colors, so if someone's playing a monocolor deck, you probably get a lot of things. Painter Servant is like really strong with this, because you just make all their permanents 1 color, name it, and you get that many fairies. So that's neat. I'm gonna put this in very fun, I think. Cat, I hear you. I love you very much. Next up is Oscar, Rubbish Reclaimer. It's a 5 mana 3/3 human wizard. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard, and whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. Could be a cool cycling commander, because if you cycle a non-land card, it's discarding as part of the cost, then you can just cast it from your graveyard. I'm gonna put that in, I think, fun. I think that could be a fun commander. Next up is Phoenix, God of Deception. 5 mana 4/7 God Indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue and black is less than 7, it isn't a creature. And creatures you control have tap. Target player puts the top X cards of his or her of their library into their graveyard, where X is the creature's toughness. Is this creature's toughness? So a lot of people play like a crab deck with this because crabs have a lot of toughness. So you play a bunch of crabs, tap the crabs, mill a whole bunch of people. If I had to build a mill deck, Phoenix would probably be the commander for it, just because of how powerful it is. However, I'm not a huge fan of mill decks, so I'm gonna put this at the tail end of fun. One thing that's neat is Screeching Scorch Beast in this deck actually seems really good, because when you mill cards, whenever people mill cards, you then also get zombies from it, so that's nice. Non-land cards. Yeah, I think there are some new Fallout cards that actually go really well with Phoenix. Next up is Princess Lugreza. This is a 6 mana 5/4 that legend, probably like a human, that you tap, add a blue to your mana pool, and that's it. It's a 6 mana mana dork. Not fun. I mean, I don't know what else to say here. I guess you can break it with Intruder Alarm if you really want to. Next up is Ramirez de Petro Pillager. 4 mana 4/3 human pirate. When it enters, you lose 2 life and create 2 treasures. That seems solid. And whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to a player, exile a top card of that player's library. You may cast the card for as long as it remains exiled. So notably, you can't use mana of any color, but that's okay because you get treasure tokens, and its other pirates can attack, so you don't have to attack with Ramirez. Seems like a very fun pirate commander. Next up is Ramirez de Petro. This is the original 6 mana 4/3 first strike. Actually, it's less fun than a mana door. Next up is Ramses Overdark. It's a legend. It says tap, destroy target creature, which has an enchantment. Destroy target enchanted creature. Tap, destroy target enchanted creature. Still less fun than a mana dork. Next up is Ramses, Assassin Lord. 4 mana, 4/4 human assassin with Death Touch. Other assassins you control get +1/+1. And whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked this turn by an assassin you controlled, you win the game. So if you are an assassin's deck and you get this out, you just win if you can kill one person with assassins. That actually seems kind of fun. I'm gonna put that in fun. I think below Phoenix. I don't know how I feel about having a win the game card in the command zone, but it is hyper specific. But also I feel like there are ways to get around that aren't actually that difficult, because you can attack someone with a infect creature, and so long as you had an assassin also attack them, you win. So you could do some sort of Dimir infect with this, and having ways of casting spells at instant speed. So you attack, no blocks before damage flash this in, because damage doesn't go in the stack anymore. So yeah, you would have to do that after blocks are declared and before damage is dealt. Next up is Rassilon, the War President, 5 mana 3/4 Time Lord Noble. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 2 life and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. And for each non-creature spell you cast from exile, each non-creature spell you cast from exile has Conspire. So as you cast that spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. When you do, you copy it, and you may choose new targets with a copy. I don't remember this commander from the Doctor Who decks. I mean, clearly it was in there, right? But why haven't I seen this card before? This seems solid. You have to, each non-creature spell you cast from exile. So even if you cascade into something, you're casting it from exile. This seems fun. I'm gonna put this in very fun. Put that like here. Yeah, that seems cool. Next up is Rawl, Troubleshooter. 3 mana, 1/4 Zombie Mutant Rogue. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from among cards in your graveyard that were milled this turn. Tap, each player mills a card. Solid in the 99, not really into it as a commander. Next up is Rilsaw Rawl, Kingpin. 5 mana, 2/5 Human Rogue with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative, and whenever you attack, target attacking creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. If you completed a dungeon, that creature also gets +5/+0 and gains First Strike and Menace until end of turn. That's brutal. Give it Trample. No, but in all honesty, I think this is a kind of fun commander. If you want to do like Dimir dungeons, I guess, but I'm not that interested. There's some background combos I'd rather do that I'm not discussing here. I mean, I guess if you want to do a dungeons deck, it's great in the 99. If you completed a dungeon, you can give creatures basically unblockable, right? You don't want to double block a First Strike Death Toucher that has Menace. You have to put so much power in front of it to like get through to it. Next up is Riven Turnbull, 7 mana 5/7 tap, add a black. 7 mana Mana Dork is less fun than a 6 mana Mana Dork. Next up is Rona, Disciple of Gix. 3 mana 2/2 Human Artificer. When it enters, you may exile target historic card from your graveyard. You may cast non-land cards from exile with Rona. 4 tap, exile the top card of your library. So you have to exile them with Rona, and it's 4 mana tap to do that. I'm sure I'm going to say this and people are going to come at me, but it's going to go into kind of fun. I'm only saying that because I feel like, because they have to be exiled with Rona specifically, that's just a bit harder to do. I'm sure there are ways to break this. I'm sure there's some convoluted combos that people have, but personally, I'm not into it. Next up is Rona, Herald of Invasion. 2 mana 1/3 Human Wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, you untap Rona, and then you can tap, draw a card, discard a card, so tap and loot. And then you may pay 6 mana, 5 and a Phyrexian black, so either 2 life or black, to transform it. Activate only as a sorcery to become Rona, Tolarian Obliterator. This is a Phyrexian wizard with trample. It's a 5/5. Whenever a source deals damage to Rona, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So if you flip this for 5 mana, which isn't that hard to do, especially, I mean, it's 5 mana. You can play this on 2, ramp a little bit with some treasures or some rocks, and anytime a source would deal damage to it, you just get to steal stuff from their hand. It's that source's controller. So actually what you could do, and I'm sure people have thought about this, but if you deal damage to your own Rona, you get to just exile cards from your hand at random and put your lands into play or cast spells from your hand. So that seems actually, I never thought about that before. That seems fun. I'm going to put that at very fun. I'm going to put that right up here. Neat. All right, next up is Rona, Sheoldred's Faithful. 5 mana 3/4 Human Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses a life. You may cast Rona from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. Seems like a fine commander. I'm going to put this in kind of fun. I think in the top end. It's Dimir spells, and you can avoid the commander tax by just discarding cards. You're in blue, so you can fill your hand but pretty easily. Seems fine. Next up is Runo, Stormkirk. 3 mana 1/4 Vampire Cleric with flying. When it enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If a creature card with mana value 6 or greater is revealed this way, you transform this, and it becomes Crothis, Lord of the Deep, which is a 3/5 flying Kraken horror that when it attacks, you create a tap and attacking token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. If that creature is a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent, create 2 of those tokens instead. So if you want like a sea creature, Typal, or Kindred deck, this seems like this could be a good commander. You have to like mill stuff and then put a creature on top, and then it's a little convoluted, but I don't think it's that hard to do. So I'm going to put this in, I think, fun. I'll put it like right in the middle of fun. Next up is Satoru Umezawa. 3 mana 2/4 Human Ninja. Whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, Put one of them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, or in any order. This ability only triggers once each turn. So it's not quite brainstorming. And then each creature in your hand has ninjutsu for 2 blue and a black. So famously people were like, oh, you can ninjutsu out like Blightsteel Colossus. And you can. That's boring. However, I like ninjas, and that seems kind of fun. So I'm going to put that, I think, also like right here. Next up is Satoru the Infiltrator. 2 mana, 2/3 human ninja rogue. Whenever it and one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, you draw a card. So this is like a cool blink commander, because if they enter, they weren't cast. Ninjutsu is also great here. Zero mana costed, 0 mana value creatures. My brain turned off there. Also, because you're casting them, but no mana is spent to cast them. If you get to cast stuff for free, it's a super powerful like value commander. And I think I'm gonna put it in. Fun, or very fun. Next up is Sharky, Tyrant of the Shire. 4 mana, 2/4 Avatar Rogue. Activated abilities of lands your opponents control can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. And this creature has all activated abilities of lands your opponents control except mana abilities. Mana of any type can be spent to activate those abilities. What a weird card. So I guess if someone has a lands deck, you can turn off like their Field of the Dead. Well, it's only activated abilities, right? Okay, so yeah, never mind. Field of the Dead doesn't do anything, but it does turn off cards like Blast Zone and Demolition Field and Dark Depths, which doesn't really matter. And what else? I feel like there are a bunch of utility lands that I guess Shifting Woodlands are like the new lands from MH3, but I don't know if I'd want to have this as my commander. I'm going to put it in Kinda Fun. Next up is Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. 3 mana, 2/2 legendary artifact creature human. Has Death Touch. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. It has partner. I'm not going over partner pairs in this video, just as standalone commanders. And as is, it seems fine. I'm not that interested in this as a commander, I don't think. Next up is Silumgar, the Drifting Death. 6 mana, 3/7. It has flying and hexproof, and whenever a dragon you control attacks, creatures defending player controls get -1/-1 till end of turn. So, alright, I don't really know how I feel about this commander. It seems like it's probably fine. If you want to build Dimir dragons, I guess? I don't know. I'm gonna put this, I guess, in the middle of no, I'm gonna put this, it's dragons, so dragons are fun. I'll put it, in the top end of Kinda Fun, I guess. Next up is Savitri Sarzam. 7 mana, 6/4 legend. It's a vanilla creature. It's literally just a vanilla creature. I'm good. Next up is Savitri Dragon Master. Not a creature, actually a planeswalker. 4 mana, 4 loyalty. You may +1 until your next turn. Creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control, unless their controller pays 2 life for each of those creatures. Search your library for a dragon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. This is -3 if I didn't say that, and then -7 is destroy all non-dragon creatures. This is more interesting. I'm gonna put this in fun. I'm gonna put that in fun. I like planeswalkers as commanders. Don't ask me why. I have 2 planeswalker decks, I think. Not planeswalker dedicated decks, but decks. Oh, 3. I have Minsc and Boo, Commodore Guff, and Jared Catholian. So I like them. And I think this is a cool dragon commander. Next up is Skeleton Ship. It's a 5 mana, 0/3 ship. If anytime you control no islands, you bury the ship. And you can tap, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. I wish this was in Golgari colors, because it would be so good in a Vraska deck or a Scorpion God deck if it was Rakdos, but it is Dimir. It's probably good in -1/-1 counter decks, and I love that it's just a ship that isn't a vehicle. It's literally just a ship. I don't know. I like that. In terms of how fun I think it is, I'm gonna have to put it in probably not fun. I'll put it in the top end of not fun, but when I see this card, I do kind of chuckle. Next up is Sig River Cutthroat. 2 mana, 1/3 Merfolk Rogue. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, you may draw a card. Card draw. I tried to build a Hate Bears deck with this during COVID, and I was so hyped to play it, and I played it for 2 games, and I hated it so much. It did not work how I wanted it to, and I was so upset. But I'm not gonna let that taint my opinion of it. I'm gonna put this in the top end of Kinda Fun, rather. I think if you want to build a Dimir deck, this is probably fine. Next up is Sadik, Lord of Secrets. It's a 7 mana, 5/5 vampire with flying. If you deal combat damage to a player, instead put that many +1/+1 counters on this card, and that player puts that many cards from the top of their library into their graveyard. Yeah, this is fine. I'm not really into this. Not fun. I guess it's here. I don't know. It's another mill commander, and it's 7 mana, and then it doesn't have any protection. I don't know. You just kill this thing repeatedly. Next up is Tygam Sidisi's Hand. It's a 5 mana, 3/4 human wizard. You skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top 3 cards of your library. put one in your hand, the rest into the graveyard. You may pay a black, tap, exile X cards from your graveyard. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. I don't really care about that second ability. What I care about is the upkeep, where you look at 3, 1 in your hand, 2 in the yard. This is exactly like Underrealm Lich, which is a Golgari creature that has a similar effect. It is every time you would draw, so it's better than Tygam. However, you'd get that effect in the command zone, and if you're building a reanimator deck, being able to put 2 creatures and pull into your graveyard and take the reanimation spell is very powerful. I'm gonna put this in fun. I really like this effect. Next up is Talion the Kindly Lord. 4 mana, 3/4 Fairy Noble, flying. When it enters, choose a number between 1 and 10. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the chosen number, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. I'm not really into this as a commander. I'm gonna put this in kind of fun. I think it's fine in like the 99 of a deck, maybe for playing CEDH, and you can put this on like 0 or 1, like numbers that you know that where decks are, but I really am not a fan of this on its own and like casually. Next up is Tasha the Witch Queen, another Planeswalker. It's a 5 mana, 4 loyalty Planeswalker Tasha. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, you create a 3/3 black demon creature token. +1, draw a card, and then for each opponent, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard and put a page counter on it. Its -3 is you may cast spells from among cards in exile with page counters on them without paying its mana cost. So you kind of exile people's spells, and then you can minus it to cast one of them for free. It has to be an instant or sorcery spell to get a page counter on it. I don't know if there are any other ways to get page counters on stuff. If there are, sick, but I don't think so. It's a 5 mana Dimir commander, but that kind of gives you time to set up. I mean, you have to wait like 2 turns though, right? Because you have to like plus it and then minus it. If you blink it though, you could plus it, have it blink, come back, and then minus it. So there are workarounds for it. I'm gonna put this in fun, I think. Next up is Tegwheel, Duke of Splendor. 3 mana, 2/3 Fairy Noble, flying Death Touch. Other fairies you control get +1/+1, and whenever another fairy you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. So Tegwheel is the face commander of the Fairy Precon from Wilds of Eldraine. I think this is not the face commander. This was the alternate commander to that deck, and I think the better one. This seems very fun to me. It's like a Fairies Aristocrats deck, and you can do some pretty nutty things with like Bitter Blossom, which I don't think is as expensive as it used to be. Yeah, Bitter Blossom's down to like $13 for the anime art, which I'm surprised is the cheaper version of it. So yeah. Next up is the Ancient One. 2 mana, 8/8 Spirit God. It has Descend 8, so this creature can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, including lands. You may pay 2 a blue and a black, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. So you probably want to mill yourself so you can have actually attack with this thing. I don't know how easy it is to get to Descend 8 by turn 2. I'm trying to think if there's an easy way to do it. I don't think so. I mean, maybe if you do some sort of like Soul Ring combo start, but like probably by turns, I think like turn 3, turn 4, realistically, you could probably get this if you dedicate your deck to it. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you want to build this as a commander. I guess you can, if you're doing self-mill, this actually does make a good reanimator deck, right? Because you can draw a card, and then you can try to draw into like a reanimation spell, and then discard a creature that you want to reanimate, and then you can mill even more cards equal to that card's mana value. Seems fine. I'll put that in fun. Next up is the Cyber Controller. It's X blue, blue, black for a Cyberman 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent mills X cards. Put all creature cards that were milled this way onto the battlefield face down under your control. They are 2/2 Cybermen artifact creatures. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's another mill commander, but you get like Cybermen and artifact creatures, and you don't have to mill, and you get all the creatures, which is kind of like rude, but funny. Is there a way? There must be a way in Dimir to turn creatures face up, right? Because you put them face down, and if you can flip them face up somehow, I'm gonna put that in fun. Only because you can try to maybe flipping the creatures up. Next up is the Master Formed Anew. It's a 2 mana Time Lord Rogue 0/1. When you cast a spell, you may exile a creature card you control with a takeover counter on it. You may have the Master Formed Anew enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature card in exile with a takeover counter on it. So I actually love this card. I built a Garuda companion deck with it on the channel, which you should check out at some point. The idea is that you have a 2 mana commander that can always become a copy of Garuda. I like that it's a cast trigger, and it's only 2 mana for this commander, so it's like pretty easy to like cast over and over again. I'm gonna put this in Wanna Build. Next up is the Master Mesmerized, I think? I don't know. 4 mana, 3/3 Time Lord Rogue. Tap, target creature an opponent controls with power less than or equal to the Master's power gains Skulk until end of turn. Goad It. Whenever a creature with Skulk deals combat damage to one of your opponents, you put a +1/+1 counter on the master and draw a card. It's so weird that they didn't put the full name of the card on the rules text. That's just kind of funny. I think this is a cool commander. You draw a card and put a counter on things, and you force other people's creatures to attack. I'm into that. I think Goad's like a really underutilized mechanic in Commander, which there should be a whole video on that, but yeah. Next up is the Mouth of Sauron. 5 mana, 3/4 Human Advisor. When it enters the battlefield, target player mills 3 cards, then amass Orcs X, where X is a number of instant and sorcery cards in that player's graveyard. So it enters, you mill, and then maybe get, I don't know, it's an army deck, I guess. I don't know. I'm gonna put that in kind of fun. I'm not that into this card. It seems fine. I mean, you can target yourself, but I don't know why you'd want to do that. I mean, I guess you could. Nah, it's still kind of fun. Next up is the Scarab God. 5 mana, 5/5 God. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Pay 2 a blue and a black. Exile target creature card from a graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. When the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So you have to exile this thing to really get rid of it, which is fine in Commander at this point. And you get to just steal people's creatures from their graveyards, and you get a bunch of value. This has absolutely hosed me. One of the first people I started getting back into Magic with had this, or actually to Commander specifically with, had a Scarab God deck that was just brutal. Andrew, I know you're not watching this, but if you are, I haven't forgotten. And we're gonna put this in I like this card. I like reanimating things. I like stealing people's graveyards or creatures. Yeah, I think it's a fun commander. I think it's a really fun commander. Next up is Toxtril the Corrosive. This is a 7 mana 7/7 slug horror. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, you make a slug. Blue and a black, sack a slug, draw a card. This is gonna be maybe a hot take. I'm putting this in not fun. So the reason why I don't think this is a fun commander is I don't enjoy commanders that stop people from like playing the game, and the fact that it's the beginning of each end step, right? If it's the beginning of your end step, I feel like it'd be a little less egregious, but you're not giving, there isn't like a huge window to remove this before it just gets out of hand really quick. And I'm just not that interested in this as a commander. You might disagree with me, and that's okay. I don't blame you if you do. If you play this and you're like, I love this commander so much. Personally, I don't enjoy this playstyle of commander. So that's my personal take. All right, let's go to the next one. Ukenbach, the Great Mistake. That's what my parents call me. Sorry. Jokes aside. 5 mana, 6/4 Skeleton Horror, Vigilance Menace. Descend 8. You may pay 6 mana, 4 blue and a black. To return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard and only as a sorcery. Not really into this as a commander. I'm gonna put this honestly in not fun. It doesn't do anything. Like, you have to bring it back with a finality counter. Even like blinking this to get rid of the finality counter doesn't seem like it's worth it. Maybe some Altar of Dementia shenanigans, but I don't know. I feel like it's just so much work to get this to be worth doing. Next up is Ukima Stalking Shadow. 3 mana 2/2 Whale Wolf. It has partner. Again, we're not going over the partner here, just this card. It's partner with, so it's a specific card. Ukima can't be blocked, and whenever it leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power. This is a really powerful card. You Voltron it up, swing at somebody, and you can like blink it and take out someone else. If you can give it Infect, which you definitely can in black with like Tainted Strike, it's the one dealing the damage. So in theory, if you can give it 10 Infect, you can knock one person out, blink it, and then when it leaves, it's dealing the damage, and then you kill someone else with Infect. So yeah, that seems fun. I'm gonna put that in fun. Even by itself, I think it's a fun commander. Play it with its partner though. Next up is Umbrous Fear Manifest. It's a 5 mana 1/1 Nightmare Horror. It gets +1/+1 for each card your opponent owns in exile, and whenever it or another Nightmare or Horror enters the battlefield, target player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a land card. That is brutal. Again, I'm gonna put this at the tail. Do I want to put this in not fun? No, you know what? I'm going to put this in fun. I feel like Nightmare and Horror decks aren't that like popular, and I feel like there can't be that many good Nightmares and Horrors to make this so egregious. And again, if you're doing like a Blink deck, I think they're just better options, like Garuda. So yeah, next up is Drago. This is a 7 mana 4/4 with First Strike. It turns off Swamp Walk. Creatures with Swamp Walk may be blocked as if they didn't have this ability. I mean, sure, I guess it's... sure, I guess, not fun. Next up is Veil of the Nightclad. 6 mana 4/4 human wizard with Intimidate, so this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. Other creatures you control have Intimidate, and whenever it or another creature you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. I don't really know what to do with this commander. You can do Dimir Beads, Dimir Blink, I don't know. I'm gonna put this in kind of fun, I guess. Like, I'm sure you can build a cool deck around it, but the commander itself just doesn't seem like a fun commander to play. I'm not seeing this hit the board and being like, sick, that's cool. I'm like, okay, great. Next is Venser, Corpse Puppet. 2 mana 1/3 Phyrexian Zombie Wizard with lifelink Toxic 1. Whenever you proliferate, choose 1. If you don't control a creature, name the Hollow Sentinel. Create the Hollow Sentinel, a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. Target artifact creature you control gains flying and lifelink until end of turn. Notably, this card is not a artifact creature. However, you can make it an artifact pretty easily. So it's like an artifact, I mean, I feel like you could do something fun with this. I'm gonna put this in fun. I feel like there's some Dimir artifact proliferate deck that has some legs somewhere. So yeah. Next up is Vohar, Voldaean Desecrator, 2 mana 1/2 Phyrexian Merfolk Wizard. With tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You may pay 2, sack it, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell will be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Actually, it only is a sorcery. So it's a 2 mana commander that if you sacrifice it, I mean, you can get it back like pretty easily, or you just have cards like Not Dead After All and just have it die and come back. So that, I think that second ability isn't that big of a downside. It's a Dimir like spells deck. I'm gonna put this up with the other like Dimir spell commander. I think it's fine. I think there are ways you can like abuse it, but I'm not that interested in this. Next up is Wilhelt the Rot Cleaver, 4 mana 3/3 zombie warrior. Whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have decay, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. At the beginning of your end step, you may sack a zombie. If you do, you draw a card. Yeah, this is like a quintessential zombie commander. I've played it a lot. It was a lot of fun. I don't know how much of that was Wilhelt and how much of that was just zombies are a fun thing to do, personally. So I'm going to put Wilhelt... I'm going to put it very fun behind the Scarab God. Next up is Wexroll, the Risen Deep. 6 mana 5/8 Kraken, Island Walk, and Swamp Walk. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If the spell be put into a graveyard this way, exile it instead. I think this is going to be just like a middle of the road like fun commander. Maybe tail end of fun. Again, it has to deal combat damage, and they have to have a good instant or sorcery card in their graveyard that you really want to take. So I'm not that interested in this. But I think it could be fun because of like Krakens and Swamp Walk and Island Walk. But yeah, actually, no, I'm going to put it in the... I'm actually going to move it to kind of fun. I changed my mind. Next up is Widewen the Biting Gale. 4 mana 3/3 Fairy Wizard with Flash and Flying. You may pay 1 a black and a blue, pay 1 life, return this card to its owner's hand. Don't understand the point of this. Maybe if you mutate on it, because I think... Was this the Ikoria commander decks? I think this Commander 20? Yeah, I think that was Ikoria. So, I mean, I guess I could see that. If you mutate a bunch of creatures and then you pay the life, you return them all to your hand. I've never seen this card in the wild before. I had no idea it existed. I'm gonna be real with you. I'm gonna put this in not fun. Yeah, I'm gonna put that like here. I don't know. Maybe like not fun. I don't know. It's more fun than like these other two. I don't know what to do with this. Yeah, not fun it is. Next up is Xanathar Guild Kingpin. 6 mana 5/6 Beholder. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose target opponent. Until end of turn, that player cannot cast spells. You may look at the top card of their library anytime. You may play the top card of their library, and you may spend mana as assortment of any color to cast spells this way. See, this seems like a fun commander. This seems like a very fun commander. I love being able to steal people's cards, especially my friends. So I'm gonna put it like here. Yeah, I'm gonna put it there. Next up is Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. 3 mana 1/3 Human Ninja. It has Commander Ninjutsu. So for a blue and a black, you can return an unblocked attacking creature to your hand. Put this card from your hand or the command zone onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. I explained that awful, but you can also read the card. Whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value. This is going to be a scalding hot take, maybe. Yuriko's not fun. I think this was a design mistake like through and through. You don't ever get command attacks on it because it's an ability, you're not casting it, and it just leads to like really degenerate play patterns in my opinion. In casual EDH again, in CE, it's fine. I've play whatever. I don't think it's unfun in that situation, but in terms of like casual commander, I really think this was a design mistake. I'm glad they have other ninja commanders now, But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just not a fun commander to play against. And finally, we have Zareth San, the Trickster. This is a 5-mana 4/4 Merfolk Rogue with Flash. You may pay 2, a blue and a black. Return target unblocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand. Put Zareth from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may put target permanent card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I'm going to put this in fun, actually. You have to tackle the rogue, has to be unblocked, and you have to get this back from your hand. So I like that. Like, you definitely have to work around it a little bit, but I think that's an interesting way of building a rogue commander. And it's a permanent card too, right? So you don't have to take a creature. You can take if someone has a Portal to Phyrexia or a Planeswalker you want, or like anything like just powerful permanent card, or even like lands, right? You could always get a fetch land and ramp with this. Also, if you can give it double strike, you get 2 permanents. I know I was lower on other Dimir cards that have to attack, but I think this effect is unique enough and like interesting enough that I'm going to put it here. And that wraps up my Dimir fun ranking. Thanks for sticking with me all the way through. There were like 80 something commanders. It just takes a toll to record these videos. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe, and make sure to check out some of my other content shown on screen here. Alrighty nerds, I'll see you in the next one.